I remember the exact moment I realized I didn't belong to my own family. It wasn't dramatic. No yelling, no thrown glasses. Just a laugh, dry, dismissive, at the worst possible moment. We were halfway through dinner, surrounded by white linen, overpriced entrees, and carefully cultivated fake smiles. I'd flown in for my father's 65th birthday celebration, at my own expense, of course. Booked the private dining room, covered the wine list, arranged the flights for my parents, and paid for my brother Daniel and his wife to stay at the Ritz. They didn't know that part. I didn't do it for credit. I did it because I thought, just maybe, this time would be different. That maybe this time my dad would look at me and not see a failure in a button-down shirt. My wife Sarah had warned me. Don't expect anything from them, she said while we packed. Just go, be polite, and remember that their approval isn't the goal. She was right. She's always been right. But I didn't listen. I still hoped. Stupid, I know. Dinner started fine. Champagne, toasts, the kind of small talk that tastes like cardboard. Then my brother started talking about his new job, middle management at a regional tech company. My mom clapped like he'd cured cancer. Dad beamed. That's real work, he said. None of that consultant mumbo-jumbo. Then he looked at me. What is it you even do again? Besides talk on the phone and tell people what to do. I laughed. Quiet, strained. I build systems. Help companies scale. Strategy and infrastructure. Dad rolled his eyes. So you don't do anything real. Got it. I should have walked out right then. But I didn't. Because part of me still wanted him to see me. This was the man who once told me I'd end up in jail because I dropped out of college. The man I bailed out of $75,000 in medical debt after his heart surgery. The man I helped refinance his house without ever telling him it was me behind the anonymous wire transfer. I took another sip of wine and let it go. Until dessert came. Until the part that shattered everything. I wasn't always the guy with a $15 million company and a penthouse view. There was a time I lived in a garage apartment with a bathroom sink that coughed brown water and a ceiling fan held together by duct tape and prayer. I dropped out of college my first year, not because I couldn't handle the classes, but because I couldn't afford the lie. I watched my classmates take out loans their kids would one day inherit, all chasing degrees they weren't even sure they wanted. I wanted more, but I didn't have a map. My parents thought I'd lost it. Mom cried in the kitchen like I'd just announced I was joining a cult. Dad wouldn't even look at me, just shook his head and muttered, "You'll be back once you realize how the real world works." I did realize, just not in the way they expected. At first, I flailed, fixed busted boxes, freelanced graphic design with zero experience and way too much caffeine. I ran Google ads for chiropractors who paid late and argued over invoices. I failed more times than I can count. I launched a dropshipping store that got banned. Tried crypto before it was cool and lost $1,200 I didn't have. But then, out of all that chaos, something took root. I started helping small businesses build online systems, not just websites, but real growth infrastructure. CRMs, funnels, analytics, ad strategy. It wasn't flashy, but it worked. I called the company Momentum Digital. At the time, it was just me in a hoodie and a $200 Chromebook. Sarah, my wife, believed in it before I did. She proofread every pitch. Took freelance editing gigs to cover our groceries. Once, when my laptop caught fire, yes, literally caught fire while rendering a site, she sold her iPad to buy me a new one. We didn't vacation. We didn't go out. We built. By year 3, I had clients in 3 countries. By year 5, I had employees. By year 7, I was turning down investors. And the entire time, I sent money back home. Quietly. When my brother Daniel couldn't make his student loan payments, I wired him $48,000 anonymously and told him it came from a state forgiveness program. When Dad needed surgery and the insurance refused to cover rehab, I called the hospital myself and paid it in full. They didn't know it was me. They just assumed the world was suddenly kinder to them than it had ever been to me. And I let them. Because I wasn't doing it for recognition. I was doing it because they were my family. I thought, maybe if I kept showing up for them, even quietly, they'd finally see me as more than the dropout. The disappointment. The potential wasted. But no matter how many checks I wrote, or roofs I replaced, or miracle tax refunds I fabricated, nothing changed. And now, here we were. At a table that I had paid for, in a restaurant I'd reserved, celebrating a man who once said I'd be lucky to make it to 30 without a criminal record. I'd flown everyone in. Covered every hotel. Took care of the outfits. Even had someone do Mom's hair, a favor I arranged through a client. And still, I sat at the edge of the table like I was just someone's plus one. Then dessert came, and Dad clinked his fork against his wine glass. "I want a toast," he said, to Daniel, who just got promoted and is finally on a path that makes sense. Makes us proud. Everyone clapped. Then, still holding his glass, he turned to me. And to Alex, who does something on the internet, I think. Right? He chuckled. "Still not sure what you actually do, but hey, whatever keeps the lights on." A few people laughed politely. Mom smiled like she hadn't just witnessed emotional arson. I nodded, and that's when I realized something I should have figured out years ago. They didn't forget to be proud of me. They never wanted to be. For a moment, I didn't move. I just sat there, wine glass in hand, face frozen in something between disbelief and restraint. The laughter around the table softened into that awkward, trailing chuckle people use when they know someone's been insulted but don't want to make it worse by acknowledging it. Even Daniel looked uncomfortable, which was rich, coming from the guy who once called me Facebook famous as an insult at Thanksgiving. I looked at Sarah. Her jaw was tight, but her eyes were calm, the kind of calm that comes right before a tornado. She gave me a tiny nod. Not permission. Just presence. Just, "I'm here. Do what you have to do." So I stood up. "I want to make a toast too," I said. The room quieted. Half the guests had already leaned back in their chairs, dessert forks clinking against porcelain. My mother looked nervous. My father just smirked. "I want to toast the man of the hour," I said. To my father, who once told me I'd never amount to anything, who called me a dropout and said I'd end up begging for work, who didn't come to my wedding because it conflicted with a golf tournament. A murmur went through the room. My dad's smirk twitched. I went on. "I want to thank him for teaching me what not to become. Because if I'd waited around for your approval, I'd still be sleeping on a futon and praying a $40 invoice would clear before rent was due." Someone dropped a spoon. It hit the floor with a delicate ping, like a punctuation mark. "You want to know what I do, Dad? I build companies. I help people turn ideas into empires. I employ 120 people across 3 states. I pay more in quarterly taxes than you ever made in a year. And I did it without your help, without your encouragement. Hell, without a single, 'I'm proud of you.'" My dad's face went pale. "But I still helped you. I paid your hospital bill. I covered Daniel's student loans. I paid off the second mortgage you didn't even tell Mom about. All anonymously. You thought the universe had your back? That was me. The dropout." Silence. Sarah reached under the table and took my hand. I didn't even realize I was shaking. "I paid for this dinner. The flights. The hotel. The suit you're wearing? You're welcome. Happy birthday." Then I set down my glass. And I walked out. No yelling. No drama. Just a clean, final exit. Outside, the night air was cool and sharp. It smelled like cut grass and cold steel, like something new was being forged. Sarah caught up to me in the parking lot, heels clicking, eyes wide. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. Actually, for the first time in a long time. We got in the car, drove back to the hotel in silence. No music, no words, just the kind of silence that feels earned, the kind that closes a chapter. The next morning, I woke up to 3 missed calls. Mom, Daniel, and one from Dad. No voicemails, just calls. The silence, it seemed, had finally flipped sides. The calls didn't stop. By the end of the day, I had 12 missed calls, 6 voicemails, and 2 text messages that read like public relations drafts. One from my mother, "Let's not let one moment undo everything we've built as a family." The other, from Daniel, "Hey, things got heated, but you kinda ambushed Dad. Can we talk?" I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to be cruel, but because I was finally learning the difference between silence and surrender. Sarah and I flew home that evening. She didn't ask me if I was okay again. She didn't need to. She just leaned her head on my shoulder during the flight and let me be quiet. I turned off my phone for 2 days. Sat on the balcony with a glass of bourbon and my old notebook, the one I used to plan my business in a coffee shop that kicked me out once for not ordering enough. I found a page from 6 years ago with a scribbled goal, make 100K in 1 year. Buy Mom something nice. I laughed when I saw it. I never did buy her that gift. I just kept paying bills she didn't know existed. On day 3, the email started. A long one from Dad, formal, almost sterile. "Alex, I believe we both said things we regret. Perhaps a more rational discussion can take place." It ended with, "I never intended to diminish your efforts. I simply don't understand them." That last line stuck with me. I simply don't understand them. It wasn't an apology. It was an admission, one that finally made things make sense. My father didn't just disrespect my work. He truly couldn't comprehend it. To him, work meant hands in the dirt, sore backs and sweat. Suits were for liars. Laptops were for boys in basements. No matter how many zeros I stacked onto my net worth, he'd still see me as a dropout with a big mouth and a lucky streak. And knowing that was freeing, because I realized that nothing I ever did would change his story about me. But I could stop letting it write mine. The next time my phone rang, it was Daniel. I let it go to voicemail, then played it on speaker while making coffee. Hey man, look, I get it. You were right to be pissed. I didn't know you paid off Dad's stuff. I didn't know about the loans. I feel like a jackass, honestly. But I also think you dropped a bomb in the middle of dinner, and now none of us know how to clean it up. Just call me when you're ready. I poured coffee, took a sip, didn't call him back. Instead, I opened my laptop. Not for work, not for emails. I opened a blank document, titled it Freedom Blueprint. It was an idea I'd been sitting on for months, a mentorship program for young entrepreneurs who didn't have support systems, who were told they weren't enough, who heard you'll never make it so many times they started to believe it. And suddenly, it felt urgent. Because if I had learned anything, it was this. Revenge isn't the goal. Freedom is. The irony of peace is that it feels almost suspicious when you first earn it. I kept waiting for the next blow, the next betrayal, the next obligation disguised as affection. But nothing came. Just space. Just quiet. It was almost jarring. Sarah noticed it, too. You've been sleeping better, she said one morning as she passed me coffee. Like, actually sleeping. Not just collapsing. She was right. I wasn't clenching my jaw in my sleep anymore. Wasn't scrolling at 3 a.m. looking for validation or distractions. I deleted 3 social media apps and replaced them with a reading list and a to-do board for the mentorship program. Freedom Blueprint took shape faster than I expected. Word spread in a few entrepreneurial forums, then through a newsletter I sent out with one line that hit harder than anything else I wrote. You're not broken. You were just never built to serve someone else's legacy. By the second week, I had over 300 applications. They weren't all polished. Some were handwritten photos of torn notebook pages. Some were single sentences. One said, "My family laughs when I say I want to start a bakery. I want to laugh back someday." I read every single one, because they weren't just strangers to me. They were me. And while I was building this new thing, my family was unraveling in the background, silently but steadily. Daniel sent another message. This one longer. He apologized. Said he was ashamed. Told me he'd always felt like he was competing in a race where I was invisible and winning anyway. He ended it with, "I don't expect you to forgive me. Just wanted you to know I see you now." I believed him, but I didn't reply. Because sometimes the most honest response is no response. Mom, on the other hand, stayed firmly in denial. She forwarded me articles about repairing adult family bonds with links to awkward-sounding seminars and pastel PDFs with titles like Restitching the Roots. One came with a note, "Would love to attend this with you. Natalie is going too." Ah yes, Natalie, the family's emotional escrow account. Even she sent a message, "So I guess you're, cutting everyone off now?" That's mature. I deleted it. They were spinning, scrambling, slipping on the same ice they'd poured for years. And for once, I wasn't trying to save them from the fall. Instead, I was building. I launched the first mentorship cohort 2 weeks later. 40 participants, all with grit and scars and ideas. We met virtually, shared horror stories and goals. One guy from Montana wanted to turn his late grandma's barn into a co-working space. A woman from Ohio was designing a clothing line based on vintage diners. Every session ended with the same reminder. You're not the problem. You're the builder. The funny thing was, in helping them, I rebuilt myself. I stopped needing to be understood by people who'd already decided who I was. I stopped waiting for applause from an audience that never bought a ticket to my show. I started thinking about legacy in a way that had nothing to do with money or approval. Legacy wasn't what I left behind for others to remember me by. It was what I gave people while I was still here. And that was mine to shape. I always thought legacy was something you left behind. Turns out, the real kind, the one that matters, is something you build while you're still here. The second month of Freedom Blueprint was chaos in the best way. My inbox was full of questions, updates, and screenshots of messy progress. Someone landed their first client after 11 failed proposals. Someone else got their first invoice paid. Another kid just out of high school messaged me. My dad says this is a waste of time. I want to prove him wrong. Not with words. With results. That one hit me in the chest like a freight train. We did live Q&As every Thursday night. Sarah would bring me tea and listen in from the couch, smiling whenever someone thanked me for getting it. And I did. I got it more than they knew. I didn't just understand what it felt like to be overlooked. I understood what it meant to rebuild with no one cheering. During one of the sessions, someone asked me, "Do you think you'll ever make peace with your family?" I paused, then said, "I already have. It just doesn't look like what they wanted." Because peace isn't always a reunion. Sometimes peace is a door you don't open anymore. Sometimes it's realizing the house was on fire for years and you finally walked out and stayed out. My family kept reaching out in waves. Mom tried guilt. Daniel tried humility. Natalie tried sarcasm. Dad, interestingly, tried silence. His only message came in the form of a forwarded article titled, "Sons Who Walk Away, A Father's Perspective." I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Because while they wrote think pieces in their heads about what went wrong, I was building something that worked. Freedom Blueprint expanded. We got a grant. A feature in a mid-tier business magazine. Someone's TikTok blew up about our community. I got DMs from people in countries I'd never visited. "You made me feel like I'm not broken," one read. "Just unchosen. But that's fixable." I printed that one out. Framed it above my desk. Not to inflate my ego. To remind myself that healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, gentle, relentless. And sometimes it looks like sleeping through the night for the first time in years. It's not like I stopped loving them. That's the cruel magic of family. You can love someone who never earned it. But love without boundaries isn't love. It's erosion. I don't hate them. I just don't miss needing them. Not like I used to. That's what changed. Now, I spend more time building people up than defending my worth. More time planting things than proving I can survive fires. And the funny thing? That's when people finally started listening. Not just the myths, but people from the old life. The dinner guests. The former doubters. Even one of my cousins who once said I'd burn out like every dropout does reached out and asked to invest. I said no. Because Freedom Blueprint wasn't for them. It was for the kid eating gas station sandwiches while coding at midnight. For the single mom trying to launch a skincare brand out of her kitchen. For the quiet one in the back who had too much potential and not enough support. It was for me. For the version of me that deserved better. In the final, most unexpected shift, I stopped replaying the dinner scene in my head. I didn't need the last word anymore. Because I'd already said the most powerful one that night. Okay. Not in surrender. In full, quiet power. Okay. I'm done shrinking to fit your story. Okay. I'm done financing your comfort. Okay. I'm leaving and not looking back. So I didn't. And in doing so, I gave myself something they never could. Peace. Not the kind you inherit. The kind you earn.